So as I had stated earlier, he starts to write for The Nation, and he has a weekly column, and he passed in 2010, and he wrote for The Nation every week since 1958. 52 weeks a year. So just think about how many articles that is. So anyways, anti-war efforts. So during this period of time, while he's teaching at BU, he had met a guy by the name of Richard Walton at Columbia. They were students together. Richard was a historian, and his interest really came down to strictly the presidencies, and why these guys chose to do what they did, how they were strong-armed into doing what they did as well. And he wrote several books on Roosevelt and several books on Truman, and so these two guys got together, and Richard Walton was also part of this whole SNCC thing. He was teaching at Brown University. So they started writing for the Commonwealth and for Ramparts. And they started writing weekly articles in the Atlantic and Harper's on the issue of the New Deal. What's happening? What is Johnson going to do? Is Johnson going to recreate the New Deal? And so it was a very interesting collaboration. Of course, the Vietnam War was happening at this time, and so he wrote in 1967 a book called Vietnam: The Logic of Withdrawal, again published by Beacon Press. He became really good and fast friends with Noam Chomsky. They too collaborated on many things. But the very first thing that they collaborated on was I'm having a brain fart. The Pentagon Papers. Daniel Ellsberg was a friend of Howard Zinn's wife, Rosalind. And Ellsberg is the guy who copied the Pentagon Papers. Chomsky and Howard Zinn were given copies, and they are the guys who edited the copy, who put it together, who annotated it, good God. I mean, if it wasn't for them, I don't think Ellsberg would have been able to push it. And it was Zinn who pushed Beacon Press to publish the Pentagon Papers. No other press would ever touch it, and he went to a lot of people, going to the Washington Post, and she said, "No, I'm not going to touch this yet, not yet." So, anyways. And he passed this on to a sitting senator by the name of Mike Gravel, who was from Alaska, actually from Massachusetts, but went out to Alaska and took that seat. And he was a left-leaning Democrat, and he read the whole thing on the Senate floor so it could be part of congressional papers. So there would be no hiding of information. This, of course, put Howard Zinn on the map with the FBI files. And because he was close friends with Ellsberg, he was almost tried for the issue of treason. He got out of it. Irwin, what's his name? The U.S. Solicitor General. Griswold actually was was a proponent of getting this on the fact base. And so that was Griswold versus the U.S., and then Gravel versus the U.S., and this went all the way to the Supreme Court for freedom of speech issues. Anyways, so this put him on the map. And then, you know, his fast friendship with Noam Chomsky. So why am I bringing all of this up? I mean, what was the significance of the Pentagon Papers? Anybody have a clue? Anybody know what the significance of the Pentagon Papers were? It was how the war was being fought, and how the effects of the industry could perpetuate the war. Now remember, Ellsberg worked for Rand Corporation, and obviously after him releasing the papers, you know, he lost his job. But you know, that's kind of how it rolls. Anyways, so that was his first major controversy. His second controversy was essentially talking about how the as Peter had mentioned, how the hard hats were conservatives, and he needed to find a population that he could speak to. And he wrote a number of books on that, and I have the list here, on how one can speak to the said population. Now remember, this population that he's writing to, this population that he's speaking to, are the intellectuals and artists and musicians, and these are the people that picked up what he was saying. As the conservative state, you know, the vast left-wing conspiracy of Hollywood and the media. Anyways, he wrote several books between 1969 and 1980. I'm not going to get into all of them, but I'm going to read you a couple of them so you understand, you know, you get the title. Disobedience and Democracy, 9 Fallacies on Law and Order. This revolved around his case in the Supreme Court. All about, I mean, and he fought for the issue of freedom to assemble, fought for the issue of freedom of speech through many guides. If it's writing, if it's spoken word, if it's the written word, and how to get this out there. For a long time, his stuff was not being taught, either in secondary school or in colleges. Now, if you attend college, it's mandatory reading. So there's an advantage. You know, we've advanced. Politics of history, justice in everyday life, the way it really works. Justice, eyewitness account, and then of course, People's History of the United States. Now that was that had been revised several times. That's why it starts where it starts and ends at the 2000 election, as it was initially published, as Martha said, in 1980. It is, as one of his professors has stated, Henry Steele Commager, who was a great Civil War historian, that this man is going to create a new history for America. So I want to talk about his third controversy. American Historical Association, he was a member of, and he partook in, and most of his awards come from that group. Anyways, the president at the time, John Fairbanks, fought him on stage for the mic. They fought over the mic, and essentially he says, you know, John Fairbanks telling him several years later, you know, our brief struggle for the mic was inappropriate, but and he was shut off, and no one would publish, except for Beacon Press, publish his works. Usually historians can get their works published through the AHA. So anyways, and he has two children. One is a historian. One actually taught here at USF for a very brief period of time. But anyways, he dies in 2010, just after swimming in a pool. He dies of a massive coronary. That was in Santa Monica. And it was interesting, he was scheduled to speak at the Crossroads School, and his last lecture was called A Collection of Ideas, The People Speak. Now, awards, volumes of awards, a couple of them I do want to mention. In 1999, he was given the Upton Sinclair Award. Upton Sinclair being probably the greatest, well, was considered a muckraker at the time, but a great novelist. The Eugene V. Debs Award, and then of course the UN gave him a lifetime award for his works in peace. If there's anybody else who'd like to come up and talk about him and read some of his stuff, I'm all for it. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Well, I guess that concludes our presentation for today. I want to thank everybody for coming out to join us, and thank the Blueberry Patch for allowing us to have our presentation here, and all the work with the ink tank that Ian O'Hara does, and the contributions from all of you here. Thank you so much, and we'll be back again in February. And Mr. Kurt Thompson for videoing.